Okay. All right, guys. So we're back in the podcast studio. And this is a podcast that might surprise quite a bit of, I don't know, our listener base. Is I brought in one of my landlords to talk to me, Tim Lorenz. I farm for Tim and Colleen in 2 different counties. And Tim, I mean, I'll let Tim tell a little bit of his backstory, but a little bit on our backstory. Dad, they bought a piece of land here in Chase County, and Dad was fortunate enough to pick up that piece of ground. And then Dad's retired, and Samantha and I taken over the operation. And anyway, he was riding with me when I was planting the corn on it the other day, and we had the conversation that just kind of went off on the value of a good working relationship with the landowner and the farmer. And I was driving home, and I was like, this is something I think would be so beneficial because we have a lot of farmers that listen to this podcast. We have a lot of landowners that listen to this podcast. I think it's something that would be of great value just to discuss. And I think a lot of farmers are nervous when they just talk to their landowners. I think they're afraid that they're going to have a negative reaction to anything. And I have found that the more upfront and honest and open you can be with your landowners, now, sure, there's some poor landowners out there, as there's some poor farmers. But I wanted to bring that in, and I value Tim's opinion. Tim grew up on a farm. Give me a little backstory on you, Tim.
Well, I guess I would say I've always been a farmer in my mind, although I've never farmed, and my opportunities were different than getting involved in farming, because when I grew up, our family operation was small, and the times were different back in the 70s. The farm program was different. The basis that my dad had was sorghum and wheat, and if you wanted to be in the farm program, that was your option. Those were the options at that time. I actually raised a few hogs.
Really?
Though after Colleen and I married, we lived in town, but we had a hog lot out at my dad's place. But that wasn't sustainable either, the market prices of pork. But my opportunities were really around getting an education, and so I over time earned my accounting degree and an MBA, and worked in the aerospace industry most of my career, and about 21 years ago now, we bought our first field, and it's grown from there. And I'm interested in the process, in the yields, just primarily, I guess, because I have an interest in agriculture, but I also have an interest because my interest, taking a share of the crop, are tightly connected to the grower.
Sure.
And so, cost inputs, because I participate in some of the inputs, the traditional fertilizer and growing or in-crop chemicals. So, cost effectiveness and trade-off for the cost with yield, interests me from that perspective. But I think I have kind of that connection a lot of growers have, just enjoying to see the crop in the field and see it thrive and understand kind of what it took to get to that point.
Well, I think there's different farmers or different landowners, but the ones that are, in my opinion, the most enjoyable to work with, I don't want to say the best. It's just everyone's situation is different. Are the ones that do care about the crop, because most of my landlord tenant relationships are sharecropping, and when you get a percent of the crop, like you said, you tend to care more. And now some people are like, they would rather have a consistent income that's more safe and less variable, and that's understandable. But, I guess, how do you, as a landowner, I don't know. And I mean, I'm a landowner as well, but I'm also, I'm also the farmer, the tenant, et cetera. And so you're looking at a piece of property and you want to make a return, and so how do you're very good with numbers. I've known you for long enough to know that for sure. When you buy a piece of land, when you're looking at a piece of land and everything else, how do you weigh out, the investment side? Because I mean, you believe firmly that land is a good investment. We've had those conversations. How do you weigh that out?
Well, of course, we all know values of cropland have escalated over the last couple of decades, and the basic economic goals that I kind of set for myself with the first 2 fields we bought really don't hold up anymore. But it's still a good economic investment, and there's still a return. It's just that the return is so much greater and more dependent now upon the valuation of the cropland and the appreciation of those acres. When I started in on this, I kind of set a goal of 4% a year appreciation of the real estate,
okay,
and a similar operating income. And there's times when operating income is done a little better than that, but it's rare. Of course, the investment goes up,
right?
So the commodity prices and the yields certainly don't keep pace with the cost per acre, but the appreciation of the cropland has far exceeded my initial target of 4%, and it sometimes has happened. Well, it's a very, very much a spiky kind of graph line where, in a year or two, values can go up 15 or 20%. And so that the average over time has been more than double average annual return or appreciation on cropland than what I targeted. And so that's the business case. That's where the majority of the value is for an investor such as my wife and I. But we have that connection to the land, and I have the interest in the crops. And some years, when conditions are poor for growing the crop, whatever it might be, drought or hail or too much rain, believe it or not, that's happened. There's still a sense of satisfaction just to see the crop came up out of the ground and the grower did everything that he could to make that crop successful.
Yeah. From a land investment side of things, because a lot of people will ask me, is it worth it? Will a piece of ground pay for itself from the crop? And I'd say it's a rare case.
It's rare, and it certainly has never performed to that extent for us as landowners, being off the farm, taking a share of the crop. That's not occurred, and I never expected that it would. But I think it's not that different for the grower if they add acres to their operation with a purchase of cropland. I'm sure they're depending on other acres to generate cash flow to help pay that debt off.
Yeah,
and it's not that different from like a residential real estate investment model where the first property is the most challenging one to finance and cash flow, but once you get that paid down and then you have additional properties to add to the portfolio, same as like fields of cropland fields, then the cash flow is if you plan it out in that manner, you can start to pay down the next purchase with with the equity you already have, and the income off of those acres.
Sure. And I mean, one thing that people say, they'll ask me, is farmland worth purchasing? I say, well, how long do you want to hold on to it? And they're like, well, I penciled out this amount of bush, say the county average. Let's say pencil out county average, and then the last 10 years of grain commodity prices, and overlay those. This is like you said, and so many people compare it to the stock market. Well, stock market has an average of, let's just say 10%. This isn't 10%. So why would I invest in land? And they so many times don't take into account the appreciation of the land. Now, the only way you can borrow against it or sell it. So, I mean, and I don't know, I don't like to sell ground. When I buy a piece, I don't buy it with the intention of selling it, and then let's say you've got a bunch of equity in it and you borrow using that land as collateral. Well, I mean, then you're in a different position. How does a grower or someone, that is, wanting to buy land, et cetera, is there a line in there that you find a balance in? I think you said it really good that, I didn't buy this piece of ground expecting it to cash flow itself in regards to a payment.
No, and I think that's why using cropland as a investment and a part of a retirement plan is not for everyone. I think it's just, the rule of investing is you really need to understand and know, what your money's being put to work in, and for people that have no connection to agriculture, and particularly a community where there's operators that you can trust, it's going to be a completely different scenario for those individuals. It probably I wouldn't advise it. I mean, I think, having some background in farming growing up, and then knowing people that are growers where in the areas that we purchase cropland, is a big part of the success for us. But for me, it's been the best hedge that I'm aware of against inflation.
Okay.
And I think we're invested in the stock market since the early 80s. My wife and I have put money in the market, and we've seen a lot of erratic cycles, and the corrections that your investment advisors talk about have become more and more pronounced. In 1987, in October, there was a correction. It was under 20% decline in equity values kind of across the broader market, but it recovered quickly in about 2 years. And then in 2000, there was that technology related correction that also recovered fairly quickly. But then in 2008 and 9, that was about a 38 to 40% correction in the stock market. And that took a decade to work itself out. And so that was a long period of very little return for the investors that are using a 401k and deferring part of their salary for the long term, and not trying to day trade and find a quick solution to regain that lost value. I mean, it was a 10-year slog from 2008 almost to 2020, and then now this post-COVID downturn has taken a couple of years. So it's a little bit more, I guess, of a traditional correction, but I don't think we're through the volatility yet with the inflation that we're all seeing in the economy.
Sure. We always saw a crazy influx in gold prices just up until last week, and then it went down hard. But I mean, it was like I was getting texts from people, dude, you see what gold prices are doing? I'm like, yeah. Yeah.
Cropland prices have had their corrections, but not not in the 21 years I've been involved doing this, but I know it was in the late 70s. There were some operators some growers that got hurt, that had expanded their operations and borrowed money against cropland. Of course, there was a spike in commodity prices, and like in the mid 70s, I think in 75 or thereabouts, and it drove up land values. And decisions were made based on those kind of temporary higher commodity prices, and land values went up, and interest rates were high then. Mortgage rates were 11 to 13%. Okay. We think 7% is high now, or I guess the general population does. I don't agree.
Right.
But
right.
There was a correction in cropland values, at least in this area, in the late 70s, and some of the growers went bankrupt. They couldn't service their debt. But I've not experienced that in the last couple of decades.
Do you think there are still deals to be found on land? Do you think, because people look back, I bought that for that, that dollar price, and today they're like, man, that's a pretty good deal. But it seems like back then I paid quite a bit for that. Do you think there's still good deals to be found in ag land, or do you think it's, I don't know, hindsight's always, that was a good deal even though it didn't appear as one back then? Because you hear so much, man, they paid too much for that. Well, 10 years later, it's, they were increasing price a lot.
Well, market values are high, and they continue to increase. I don't know that anyone would have predicted cropland, here in Chase County, going for $6,000 to $7,000 an acre, even 5 years ago, much less 10 or 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Marion County land is, now bringing $4,000 to $6,000. It depends on the circumstances and the quality of the cropland. But are there bargains or values or good opportunities? I guess it's all a matter of whether we believe those values are going to continue to increase.
Okay.
But it's certainly a barrier to entry.
Sure.
Because an investor like myself needs 30% equity to finance cropland. And so that hurdle just keeps getting higher. And I think fewer and fewer people are going to be able to
as values go up, 30% is a bigger amount.
Right. So your down payment goes higher and higher and higher. 100 acres at $5,000, that's $500,000, and of course, land sells in sometimes an increment smaller than that, but many times a quarter section, you're getting around that $800,000 mark, and that's a challenge.
Yeah, a piece of ground, at least here. I mean, the Iowa guys are sitting here, chuckling like, I can't, paying $25,000 an acre for a piece of ground. And it's, like I said, there's so many variables. You move west and your risk goes up and the price of land goes down. You move east and risk goes down and values of land go up. But in regards to, you've got a very unique perspective on agriculture, and then, the world of business. We got majority of our customer base, I'm not going to say all by any means, but a majority of our listener base is ages 26 to 38. No, I think it's 26 to 41. So a lot of guys my age, early 30s, getting in a position where maybe buying their first piece of land or maybe buying their second piece of land. Family operation is, maybe in the process of turning over. A lot of that happens, it seems like, dad gets into retirement, or maybe in some cases passes away and the farm is handed on. What is, because you said...
Hey guys, Ben and Josh here. We've been doing a blog once a month, kind of help us express out exactly how we work through problems on a monthly basis. And
it's pretty real life. It's dealing with real life problems
yeah.
on the farm. Typically, it's a vent session in short form. So, you want to check it out? Links in the description. A lot of guys in the 70s bought thinking it was going to last. I mean, I remember having in 2012, man, everybody was buying new combines because prices were, they were
commodity
good.
prices were high.
Yeah. You know, and how can a grower, a younger farmer, and this could be for so many people in so many walks of agriculture, you know, how do they weigh that risk versus reward? You know, from a business side, really looking at numbers, et cetera, what's the fine line? And everyone's case is different on what advice would you have to farmers that farmers probably don't even think about sometimes?
Well, I think the realities of economics, if a young person wants to start farming, is they need a partnership with landowners, and they're going to have to focus their investment, their capital on machinery and equipment and technology, and the input costs, you know, are significant, particularly in row crop. So they need that partnership of land, you know, working with landowners to find the, you know, available acres to grow crops on. You know, I think that's just a kind of a business premise. So you've got to have working capital to put in the crop and the equipment. Some now could be custom hired, but you don't want to give all, you know, the control over to a third party to plant your crop and harvest the crop, just with the risk and the timing involved. Mm-hmm. So you know, investing in cropland is probably something that most of the younger operators do a little bit later in their.
That would be more safer.
In their business. Well, I think it's a constraint of sorts, okay. but it's an important part of your long-term plan as a grower, because that's where the value is going to build. Mm-hmm. I mean, we all know the machinery equipment is expensive, but it's eventually going to be worth near zero, or some salvage value for the iron in it. So it's an important part of a business model for a farmer, but I think, you know, there's a lot of good operation and opportunities for profitability in farming, renting ground. But, you know, it gives you the scale a lot quicker. So I think it takes both, and I think it's just, unless you come from a set of circumstances where you've got family cropland to take over and farm, you know, you also need that personality and kind of that business development mindset to go out and find landowners that are willing to work with you. And that's a skill that I think is not a traditional skill for a lot of farmers.
No, it's not. Farmers tend to be more the quieter type that generally don't like any kind of confrontation. Some farmers do. Some farmers love it. But I guess in regards to, you know, you've been in the position where you were looking for, you know, say you bought this piece of Chase County land, you know, you were new to the area. What were you looking for? What do you value in someone that you're looking for to be the tenant of your land? What's that? What's something that you and Colleen look for that's valuable that farmers can be like, I can work on that. I need to work on that.
Well, being able to trust that operator is kind of the foundational requirement when a landowner is taking shares. You know, it's clear that, you know, loads of grain could be diverted, and the landlord wouldn't necessarily ever know, or even just a partial load. So that trust that the yield is going to be reported and delivered accurately is foundational. And then I like to know how, you know, not in terms of dollars, but how the operators capitalize in terms of operating equipment. You know, do they have the scale when weather conditions are challenging, to come in quickly and plant, and also quickly harvest the crop. Sometimes the windows are really small to accomplish that work. So they need to be, well capitalized, and then I think the best operators I've worked with, and your dad was one of them, told me what I needed to hear, not what I wanted to hear. And so we went through, a bit of an interview process with a few farmers when we bought this ground in Chase County, because we didn't know people in the community here, which was very different from the land that we had bought previously.
Yeah, it was more in the home area.
I had grown up in that area, and so, your dad Charles, told me, no, we're not putting corn in, and here's why: because the field floods, it's higher risk. If you want more assurance that you're going to have a yield, we're going to put soybeans in there the first year, and that was a good decision. And because I had other growers trying to convince me, we need to put that field in corn, and it can grow some corn, but it was higher risk.
And we had to learn what areas of the field were optimal to raise corn.
It was higher risk, and I think your operation is the most communicative with me, communicative, in terms of just keeping us apprised of when you plant it, or when you're planning to go out to the field with the planter, and when you're going to apply like top dress fertilizer or fungicide, or if you got pressure with weeds when you're putting another application of herbicide on the row crop, and I really appreciate that. I'm interested in it, but that is an exception. I think the more traditional grower calls about one time a year, and I have worked with operators like this, and they've done a good job, but the communication is primarily around harvest time, and that's it. Yeah. And that's really one touch point, maybe two a year, and I think that's missing an opportunity if you're a farmer and you're trying to develop relationships with landowners. That's not enough communication, in my opinion. Because I wonder sometimes, what's going on with the crop? Or I drive by.
Or you have to drive out there to see it.
Well, I do, because I want to anyway.
Sure.
In the growing season, I'll probably drive by every field once a week. Yeah. And when if I notice something, and I often do, then it's good. It's good.
You've let me know about things.
It's oftentimes I've already heard from you that you're addressing the problem, whatever it might be, insect pressure or weed pressure, or I can see from the color of the crop that maybe it's a little low on nitrogen, and just knowing that you're already aware of it and taking an action, it has value, and I think it makes that. We don't have a written contract, but I think it makes the kind of the oral contract a lot stickier.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Because just that flow of information.
Well, and I think farmers are, I think they say they need to go and, make another application of something to a field. I think so many farmers think that they're going to have to justify to their landowner that we need to do this. And I think there's a fine line between farmers get defensive of why they think they need to do it, when really so many times the landowner is just curious. And they're like, and it's like, okay, why are you doing this? Not why as in I don't trust you. What are we doing this for? It's like your mechanic says, you need to address this, this ball joint on your vehicle because there's an issue here. Okay, well, let's fix it. But is there, what might have caused this? Is it an alignment's wrong, or so on and so forth? That's just an analogy, but and I think so many farmers they feel like that relationship with their landowner is if I screw up, I'm going to lose the land. If I screw up, I'm going to lose the land. So as long as no one's saying, as long as, just kind of buy some time and everything's pretty good, I think we're good. We're going to get under the year type deal. When it's like, I don't know. And I have seen where those are the relationships are the most rocky and that falls through. And because it's an investment. I mean, you're invested in it. I'm invested in it. If you were two business partners in a franchise, a restaurant, you would probably talk about things much more so. But when it comes to land and farming, it seems like so many times there's a divider there. And I've heard from other landlords, I don't hear from my farmer at all. I get a check when the crop's harvested. That's all I hear. And, and I've tried to become, good. And we've got one of our guys, our distributors, he sends out, and this is something that I plan to adopt and, implement into our operation, is at the end of the year, hey, this is the positive things we saw, the negative things. This is some changes we're going to make to your land. That's like one step further about care. And I don't know, I think that's just going above and beyond.
Well, input costs have gone up in production, particularly soybeans, because I've been involved in these partnerships in farming long enough to remember when
Roundup worked.
Roundup worked, and so input costs for soybeans was minimal.
Yeah,
and now we're putting more chemicals down, more herbicides to control the weeds more frequently. I think we have more trouble with the worms or the aphids, whatever it is that eats the holes in the leaves than we used to.
Oh yeah, podworms.
And so those conversations about why these additional applications need to be made are important, because there's the change and it changes almost every growing season.
Yeah.
I of course understand that because I'm taking a share of the crop, if spending another $6 an acre is a good business decision for you, Josh, then it is for me as well. And we often talk about, what our yield loss or a yield gain could be from an additional application, let's say a fertilizer. What's the upside?
Mm-hmm.
And you think about that in terms of bushels of corn, and then I understand the economic trade-off. And I don't think I've ever vetoed something that operators come to me as a landowner.
Yeah.
With an application on a field.
Sure.
Because that's just that basic premise that, if the economics work for the grower, they're going to work for me as well. And and you have to have some working capital set aside. Mm-hmm. And I think some landowners fail to do that.
Oh yes.
And I just, I keep a cash reserve set aside to pay those input costs, and those costs have been, they've been varied, but I think the trend has been that they've been going up.
Yeah.
But ideally, then the production goes up as well. And
production,
that's
cost
the
of
goal.
or
the yield,
price of grains.
right?
Yeah.
The output goes up.
Sure. Yeah. No, it's in. I don't know. There's so many variables. I mean, I'm very fortunate with the landowners that I've, a lot have inherited from Dad. In fact, most
just transferred over.
Yeah,
you took over.
Yeah, and they have been super generous and gracious in regards to someone new coming in. I say new. I mean, I worked on the farm all growing up and this and that, and a lot of it was almost of a seamless transition. I was doing the planting and then spraying and then the harvesting and so on and so forth. And, and I think that's a good succession plan of, it's how things are supposed to be handed off, and Mom, in my case, I'm thankful Mom and Dad have done, a good job of that. But, in the position I'm at right now, seeing a lot of different growers and young guys, for a young guy, it's exciting to go out and try a bunch of new stuff. Let's swing for the fences. You know, this might be the year we hit 200 bushel corn. Oh my gosh, let's do it. You know, and then you spend yourself into what you think will get you the crop. And we've talked, you know, Ben's talked a lot about on here on the podcast. How many years do you have that home run year? 1 out of 10, maybe 2.
Yeah, probably.
And it's generally, if you plant 2 or 3 crops a year, it doesn't happen on all of them. Rarely are all 3 crops good. You know, and so it's more like, how do you, as a landowner, what do you risk versus reward? And everyone's different, obviously. Some people can have more money to spend, but how do you mix a realistic expectation in with, if we raise a great crop, cool, because we invested some extra money in this, but at the same time, risk versus reward? How's that weighed out well in an owner's side of perspective?
Well, there again, I've left those judgment calls to the farmer. And, you know, we had an example here just a few years ago on this Chase County field where we kind of watched and waited to see what the rainfall was and how the corn was responding. And then you applied kind of an extra application of fertilizer via aircraft because the corn was tall.
Yep.
So that, I mean, we were at that point close enough to tasseling that we were fairly confident we could go for a maximum yield.
Yeah.
But generally, I don't see you operate that way. I don't think very many growers do. I think the appropriate way to experiment is with a test plot and use it to learn.
Sure.
Rather than spend a lot of incremental dollars on input costs on a large tract, and it is a gamble because there's so many things that have to go right to hit that maximum yield.
Yeah, there's, I think there's, we talk about August is the month of promise and September is a month of reality. You can walk that field and you can count the ears and the kernels and the pods on the plant. And you're like, oh man, I think it's gonna be great, and then never fails. Somewhere in there. It seems you get in there and you could get in the combine, and rarely is it much higher than you thought it might be. Because I think we like to naturally hope for the best, which there's nothing wrong with that. But as long as your expectations of reality balance that out.
Yeah. Well, I think if you probably look back at your own yield records, that could serve as a very good guideline for how you want to manage your input costs.
Yeah. Absolutely.
They don't move that significantly over time.
No, that's why they have a 7-year average, not a 2-year average. Yeah. No, and I don't know, it's good. So yeah, I'm trying to think of anything else that we talked about in that when we were planting the corn, and it's a lot of fun to harvest with your landowner in the cab. I invite mine out. And I mean, I'm not sitting here trying to say that I have far from a perfect operation, far from, but I've found some things. I'm very people driven. I enjoy the relationships with people. I enjoy, some of my landlords I consider very good friends of mine, that I would call about non-farm related stuff.
Sure.
Just to talk life with. Yeah. Yeah, I do. I enjoy stopping by and just talking life, or, hey, let's go grab dinner this weekend, and so maybe I'm a special case in that, but landowners have an awful lot to teach farmers. And I can only speak from a younger farmer. I can't speak from an older farmer because I haven't been one yet, but it's just a whole lot of valuing that relationship. And then they can tell you, you've told me when, I started farming some of the ground in Marion County, if I went in blindly, I would have had no idea that, there's a certain piece of ground that, hey, this is one of our higher producing fields. I wouldn't have known that going in. They have a lot to teach you that, because they've been there longer than you have. A lot of them, there's special cases, but Okay, we're going to put corn on that one. We're going to put beans on this one.
That's right. You did make a change in your crop decision last year. In calendar 23.
Yeah, because I didn't know going in, and you've been on that ground a lot longer than I have, and so it's important for me as an operator. I mean, that spread my risk out, because you go in blindly, that's a lot more chance of things to go wrong. And it just so happened that the corn there was more profitable than I think it would have been down south last year.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So, and a part of that was due to rainfall. It rained a little bit to the north, more to the north, but still. I want, time's just about up, but I don't know. I just think it's so important for, because that landowner relationship is so often brushed under the rug as what's the term? If there's nothing broke, don't fix it type deal. Well, you also don't know what other opportunity, and there might be, you might have someone that owns a piece of ground. They might own more ground, and they aren't offering you the opportunity to farm it because they don't know enough about you.
Yeah. Well, we had some interesting back and forth over a year or so when I actually first suggested that you travel to Marion County and farm some of our cropland there. And that wasn't an immediate positive response.
Right. It was kind of a...
And then several months you came back and said, I think I want to try it. Mm-hmm. And it works, I think, now because of no-till and larger equipment and higher road speed. So there's fewer trips to the field and less time in the field. And so I think this is the second year for you traveling.
Yep.
So you're right. I mean, just like the communication, the frequency of the communication and just your style, led me to think of that. Who would I like to farm some of this land in the future? And so that's why I brought that suggestion up.
Yeah.
I don't think a farmer can over communicate with a landlord, but everyone's style's different. For you and I, it's a lot of texting.
Yep.
Some people might still want a snail mail letter.
Right.
I don't know.
And I've got a crop scout that does a lot of the crop scouting for me, just because, I don't have time. There's not enough hours in the day to do, I would have to sacrifice, whether it be time with the family or my other business, if I was going to look at every single field every single week. And it's delegation, it's delegation. And, and so I have tried to, hey, I'm going to copy, paste, so I'm going to send this to Tim. This is what my crop scout saw. And, it's just.
Right.
Yeah.
It's that's meaningful to me. And because I wonder what's going on in the field. And sometimes with other operators, I see the invoice before I know what was done.
Didn't even know they're there.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's, I think just something that the farmers need to keep in mind, that interaction, I think it's going to pay off, particularly if you're looking for opportunities to pick up more acres.
Yeah. Well, because...
Or not lose acres that you already
Or not lose acres. That's exactly right. Yeah. And it's, you never know, because, if you're looking to expand your operation, that landowner might know the neighbor next door and have a good relationship with them and say, hey, this farmer has been great to me, great to work with. It's, I think a lot of farmers in the past, and I think it's becoming more prevalent now, that they're viewing farming as a business. I think a lot of young guys are having to sharpen pencils, turn in expense reports, instead of, let's throw some fertilizer out there and go ahead and plant, and it looks pretty good, or I saw weeds from the road, we probably ought to go ahead and spray this. I think anymore you see much more of a plan put in place because of the size of operations. Like you said, more working capital, higher risk. When a brand new combine's $800,000, it's not so simple as, I think the beans will just do okay. that doesn't make a payment.
No, there's probably not very many operators in business that are, any longer that kind of made those decisions with the lack of analysis. I mean, it's their lenders probably shut them down.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So anyway, well, thank you for coming on.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I appreciate it a lot, and like I said, I really think it's something that's going to hit home for a lot of our listener, a lot of our just the network of guys, because I've had guys ask me questions regarding how do you deal with this in the landlord? How do you tell them that, hey, it is not fun when you've hyped up a crop to then your landlord calls you when he knows you're in the combine and asks you, how is it? Because he's going to get the tickets at the end and know what it made. Mm-hmm. So it's a whole lot, it's a whole lot easier just to be honest with them than to hype them up and then for the end result to be lower than what you told him it was going to be. And sometimes you don't know. Sometimes you truly could be off. But, I think if guys think or realize they don't have to necessarily impress the landowner just to keep the piece of ground. I'm not saying don't do a good job, but just being honest.
Explaining the why behind the yield, I think that's a great point, Josh. It's really important. And we can see signals during the growing season of things that could benefit yield or reduce the yield. When there's drought pressure or insect pressure, or maybe too much rain, or a variety just of things, or hail damage, communicating those things as they occur, or decisions that are being made to have certain applications applied at a higher cost, and why. I mean, those are signals along the way to the landlord of what's going on with the crop and how it might impact the yield.
Yeah. Well, last year was kind of a special case. When to pull the plug on a crop. Yeah. When do we stop putting money in? And that was the first time I've really had to, and I mean, I did it here with the double crop beans in Chase County. I had to pull the plug. It's like no amount of money spent is going to add yield to this. So and if a good farmer doesn't want to abandon a crop. No. It's painful. But that's when the business decision comes back in.
Well, we had full season soybeans in Marion County. That one field you didn't cut.
Yeah.
And I understood why.
Sure.
And that's the first time in 20 years I've had a crop that wasn't worth harvesting.
Yeah.
It's rare.
It's very rare. Yeah. Hopefully that's over with for at least 20 more years. Yeah. But anyway, I appreciate your perspective and our working relationship. And I just wanted to, I try to be honest with everyone I come across, and I think it's going to bring value to people that, just the transparency of opening up about one of my working relationships. The guy that tell guys, hey, pick up that phone and call them. Just check in. Tell them, hey, this is my plan. Just start somewhere.
Well, it's like many businesses, it's a relationship business. So unless you're fortunate enough to have a lot of family ground that is adequate, more than you could ever hope for to farm. Yeah, you need those relationships to expand your operation.
But then someone will pass away, and that land's going to sell. Yeah. And then, it always boils down to relationship. It really does. Whether it's renting, buying, so on and so forth.
Well, that's true. Yeah, I've had opportunities to buy because of the relationships that I've had. Yeah, I've been approached.
Sure.
With an opportunity to buy cropland.
Yeah,
that's always the better alternative than going to an auction and hoping you can find a good value.
Absolutely. Do you think farmers should be less hesitant to let a landowner know that, hey, if you're ever interested in selling this piece of land, I would be interested? I legit hear it all the time. Man, I didn't say anything and they sold it to the other guy. If I'd have said something, they'd have sold it to me. because land is a tedious topic. It is tedious because you don't want to say, hey, when you die, will you sell it to me? Or will you make sure that your kids sell it to me? But at the same time, you want to let them know, I'd be interested.
Yeah. Well, there's probably times where it'd be inappropriate to bring that up, but I think in general, it's a conversation that needs to be had. And the circumstances vary, but I think as a farmer, you probably know when that question could be asked. But yeah, all of us have expiration dates. Yes. So at some point, right. The name on the deed is going to change.
It will.
And if the grower's done a good job taking care of that land, then I think they should have an opportunity to buy it.
Great. I think that's very valuable insight. That was kind of a thought that came. I was getting ready to close. I'm like, oh, I remember I had this thought the other day, but just relationship and trying. I don't know anyone who dogs or who knocks someone for trying their hardest, and even if the result is poor, you got to have a lot of respect for someone who really tries. So anyway,
I agree.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate your time, and glad it worked out. And may we get good rain this year, but not too much. That's always the fine line.
That's right.
So anyway, thank you guys. Okay. Appreciate it. Appreciate your time. Like, subscribe, share if you want to. Share this with one of your landlords. There's don't be afraid to do that. So we're on social media platforms, the YouTube channel, the website, the blogs, etc. So we've got lots of opportunities out there for content. And appreciate your time. We'll catch you later.